Hi, my name is Tom Lord, and here to give a talk. The title is The title of this talk is A WebOS for Collaboration and its Ecosystem. Before we dig in, let's begin with some preliminaries. Let's talk a bit about this title. Evidently, we'll be talking about three concepts, so let's begin to try and define them a bit. First, we're talking about something called a WebOS and the activity of collaboration and some kind of ecosystem. Well, collaboration on the web, apparently via some kind of WebOS and involving somehow some kind of ecosystem, whatever that might mean. What are these concepts and how do they relate? In the spirit of putting people above most other things, let's rearrange the terms a little bit and begin with collaboration. What are we talking about when we talk about collaboration? Well, we're talking about people using the web for acts of co-creation, communication, and of course special cases of these things, such as trade, or more generally collective action. Obviously, this is a very abstract description of collaboration on the web, a very broad subject. We'll make this more concrete as the talk proceeds, but for now, let's have a shorthand and be even more abstract and boil all this down to just human interaction. So when we talk about collaboration on the web, we should remember first and foremost that we're talking about interaction between real individual people. The title said a WebOS for collaboration. So what in the world is that? Well, continuing in our highly abstract way, what is a WebOS, a web operating system? Well, we can think of it as a bunch of specific programs. In our case, we'll be talking about programs that specifically facilitate collaboration. We'll talk about protocols. Operating systems are generally understood to provide a variety of basic services and ways for programs to communicate, and so they define standard technical means for programs to access those facilities, those shared facilities. We can call this protocols. There's a subtlety. Operating systems generally give some control over something called permissions, who can run what programs, what services a given user or program can use, and so on. Implicit in the design of the programs and protocols that define an operating system is a kind of legal theory, made manifest in the behavior of these programs. And so part of an operating system is legal code. When we do that, we're picking up on the vocabulary introduced by Lawrence Lessig, who of course gets credit for articulating and helping to develop the idea that the pun between legal code and software code actually points to a very real way in which the two concepts are intertwined. Finally, while protocols captures the concept of programs sharing programmatic resources, what about data? For example, if Alice and Bob are collaborating on a research paper, perhaps Alice will use a drawing editor to create illustrations while Bob works on text. Bob's word processor had better be able to import the drawing files that Alice's drawing editor writes. Operating systems typically help to establish a set of common data formats that help programs to share data in such ways. As a kind of shorthand, we can, in the same way we summed up collaboration as human interaction, we can sum up a WebOS as the technology aspect. We're getting down to the brass tacks when we talk about WebOS, what makes this collaboration possible. And that leaves us with the somewhat mysterious term, ecosystem. How did that get into this talk? Well, If collaboration is about the perspective of individual real humans, the ecosystem is about the overall group dynamics within which those interactions take place. Before Alice and Bob ever get to work on their research paper, they have to find one another. They have to establish their mutual interest. Even if they live halfway around the world from one another and have never before met, they need to negotiate their respective roles in the projects, their sort of rights, responsibilities, ownership. They have to negotiate the technical means of how exactly they'll collaborate. Experiences in the open source world, the open source software development style, or in, say, even in the remixing of shared music tracks, tells us that a large part of the context that enables collaboration is simply cultural convention. New collaborative projects don't emerge in a vacuum. There's a background of cultural assumptions shared by all, and negotiations take place in relation to that context. Alice might propose, we should manage this project in the style of a benevolent dictator, sort of like the Linux kernel. Bob might counter that they should instead use a democratic system of core committers who vote on important issues, more like the, say, Apache project. Such recognized ways of doing things, the fact that Alice can say benevolent dictator and Bob say, core committers, these things are recognized and common, well, those are cultural conventions. And convention alone doesn't determine what happens in collaborative spaces. We can also consider a more formal system, maybe it's a subset, trade relations. For example, what if the report Alice and Bob are working on is, well, worth some money? Who will be paid for contributing to it, and who won't? How will rights to future revenues from the project be allocated? Again, individual people don't come to a new collaborative project in a vacuum. There's a field of existing trade relations and existing common and accepted contractual forms that shape the negotiations. We dub these trade relations. Well, how can we sum this up? Again, for our preliminaries here, going for a ridiculously abstract view, we can say that these are markets. We can sum up these concepts by calling them economies. So we're left with these three terms and some vague sense of what they talk about. Well, what do they have to do with one another? How do they relate? One observation is that collaboration creates the WebOS. Now, you can see this most directly, most literally, in the case of open source software development, where most of the programmers use a GNU Linux or BSD operating system to collaborate on writing the software which comprises a GNU Linux or a BSD operating system. So, collaboration creates the WebOS. We can also say that the WebOS regulates the ecosystem. That is, the technology defines the boundaries of, is the market maker of the social scene within which collaboration takes place. We can call that regulation. A simple case to illustrate. I earlier suggested Alice and Bob might have a back and forth about whether to use the benevolent dictator model of project management or to use a democratic system of core committers. Well, if the version control system, if the software they're using implements only the benevolent dictator model, they have no choice. If the software is more flexible, then they have greater choice. And this is what we mean when we say the technology regulates the economies, the WebOS regulates the ecosystem. Oh, the director tells me we have to pause for a 10-minute break. Please see the next video in the sequence. Thank you.